Last week we finished up with Christian getting to the cross. So we've kind of been waiting for that. We've watched his conviction. We watched him get stuck in the slough. We watched him get out of the slough. We watched him take detours on the mountain to the town morality, but he never made it. So he finally gets to the place where he comes into the gate. He's yanked through the gate, and then he gets to the cross. So we've been through the house of interpreter and everything else. So we've already been on quite an adventure, and now the adventure actually begins. Right? That was the prequel. This is the actual thing, okay? This is a new hope going in, okay? So he's come to the cross. He now understands who Jesus is. He understands what happened. He understands where his sin has been taken. His burden fell off. It fell into the cave. He's now free of that guilt. And so now he starts off. And as he starts off, he's going downhill. He's gaining some speed. He's ready to go. He knows his goal is to get to the celestial city, and he's ready to give it all his effort. Right? Makes sense. Good to go. So this is his first encounter. We're going to talk about two sets of people. Now, remember, in Bunyan's allegory, it's frequent that we will find sets of characters. So in this case, we'll find simple sloth and presumption, formalist and hypocrisy. We'll see later mistrust and timorous. We'll see mistrust again will actually show up again later on. Mistrust and guilt and faint heart, right? So you'll see these kind of sets of characters that come up periodically. And the idea there is qualities that are related. They're not the same, but they're related, and they usually come as a set. That's the way it's communicated, if that makes sense. So in this case, we're going to meet simple sloth and presumption. So Christian is now ready. He's excited. Remember, he got his coat, he got his mark, he got a scroll, he's got energy, he's done with his burden. You can imagine as he takes off from the cross, he's got some movement. He's got some energy, right? Now, what would be the encouragement? What's the encouragement about that energy?
Harnessing.
It's harnessing it, right? He's going. He's excited. Now, what does that do to the way you look at the world? What's the biggest problem with guys like Forrest Gump? What's the kind of the tragedy that we see in the movies? They tend to think the world thinks just like them, right? I'm redeemed. I love the gospel, so therefore, you'll love the gospel, right? How many of us have tried that before? This makes perfect sense to me. Why doesn't it make sense to you? I don't get it. Well, guess what? Christian's going to get a harsh reality check right away. So I saw in my dream that he went on thus, even until he came at a bottom where he saw a little out of the way 3 men fast asleep with fetters upon their heels. The name of the one was Simple, another Sloth, and the third Presumption. Okay, so he goes his way. What's important about these guys and where they are?
They're not on the path.
They're not on the path.
They're a little out of the way.
Okay, so what's the one hard and fast rule about getting from the cross to the celestial city? Stay on the path. There's only one, that is the one absolute easiest, obvious route. And remember he asked at the gate, he asked goodwill, but will there be any turnings that I'm going to lose the path and get lost? He goes, no, you'll always know the path. It'll always be the straight way in front of you. Okay? So anytime we see anything that's a little out of the way, what would that require a Christian to do? Leave the path. Okay? That's always bad news. So these are a little out of the way. Now there's 3 men and they're asleep, and then they have fetters on their heels. Now fetters are like the little handcuff things with the chains that you always see in dungeons and things like that. Those are fetters. So these men are, in one case, they're asleep, and at the second time, they're chained. Okay, now let's talk about those two things. Why would they be connected? What are they? What would it mean to be asleep? Because what's the other hard and fast rule that we have to remember about this path?
Keep walking.
Keep walking. There's only one direction you're supposed to go. You have to stay on the path, and you have to keep moving. The only times you're ever allowed to stop are when God says you're allowed to stop. And we'll see those. They'll be obvious. Okay? In this case, though, they are asleep in a place where it doesn't appear that it's authorized. So what do you think their attitude is? Apathy. What else?
Indifference is not that important.
Indifference. Good. What else? Actually, you can come forward. You don't have to say this back row Baptist. Yeah, these guys are complacent, right? How far away are they from the cross? Just down the hill, right? They might even still be able to see it. And yet here they are, asleep by the side of the road, off the path, and obviously not particularly worried about anything, right? The only way you fall asleep is when you're not particularly worried. And so they're just kind of sitting there, indifferent, complacent, apathetic. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of energy about these guys. These guys are my teenagers on Saturday morning. There's just no energy whatsoever, right? They're not waking up with any intent whatsoever in their mind. So this is the same way. These guys are sitting there by the side of the way. Now, they have fetters on their heels. This one's harder. What would that imply? They're in bondage to what? That's the question.
Is it like Pharaoh being hardened? I mean, have they gone off the path and so now they're forced to stay off the path?
To a degree, but keep going. What's hardening them?
It's their own hearts. Still got them.
Yeah. They are hardening by falling asleep off the path. This apathy, this complacency, they are putting themselves in bondage to. Does that make sense? They are hardening their heart like Pharaoh. They're hardening their heart towards the gospel. They have seen the cross, but they have left the way. So did they profess to be believers? Sure. But did they start to just lose it right after they saw the cross? Is this the sower and the seed, where the thorns come up and it chokes out belief? The same idea here. These men, though they saw the cross, there's something else that's more important that is essentially putting them in bondage, that they put themselves in bondage to. In this case, it's themselves, and we'll see who they are. Okay, which takes us to our next topic. They're in bondage. Now, their names are simple, sloth, and presumption. Okay, so let's read some of the scriptures. This will help. Here's what simple is. A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple man passes on and is punished. And then Romans 16, for those who are such as do not serve our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by smooth words and flattering speech, deceive the hearts of the simple. Now, from those two verses, what does simple mean? What does it mean to be simple?
You're only focused on the here and now.
Uh-huh.
The other says the prudent foresees
Good.
evil, so he's looking out
Right.
ahead, whereas maybe the simple is only.
Right. So there's an element of just what's here and now. Yep. It's true, but keep going. They lack discernment because they're not wise. Good. Keep going. Simplicity is an important thing.
Surface level, because it talks about smooth words and flattering words.
Right.
And so they're not really listening to the content necessarily. They're more of listening to how it's being presented to them.
To a degree, exactly. They're only listening to the surface level stuff. So they're about the here and the now. They're not discerning. They're only listening to the surface level. But the question now for a simple person, and there's a lot more verses about the simple, especially in Proverbs. Okay? The question is, why are they only about the here and now? Why is the simple only listening to the surface element?
Not looking to the end, to the celestial city.
Why are they not looking to the end? What is it to be simple?
There's no value.
There's no value. But think about what simple means. When you say this is simple, what are you talking about?
I don't know if this is where you're going, but it seems to me like it might be someone who loves to have their ears tickled, that kind of a person who comes to faith, but just loves the warmth and coziness of the message, and that's really where they stop.
To a degree, yes. They only like the simple things because...
Well, Because no one perhaps likes difficulties and troubles,
Mhm.
and they don't want
Yeah,
to see that.
they don't want to have the difficulties
They don't have difficulties.
because they are uncomplicated. Does that make sense? They don't like to look past the surface because they don't think there is anything past the surface. I just love Jesus. Isn't that enough? Well, yes and no. You're called to know who God is. You're called to learn to discern, to learn who God is, to understand as best you can His infinity, His holiness, all these concepts that we can't grasp. That doesn't excuse us from learning them. It doesn't allow us just to say, hey, the Bible said it, I believe it, there you go. No, that's not the way it works. To understand who God is to dive in full on. It's to take Him at His word and to learn who He is. If this God is infinite, how much do you have to learn about Him? Well, gosh, quite a bit. Right? I've been married 20 years. I'm still learning stuff about my wife. Right? And she's a finite being. Now let's take who this infinite God is. So when you're simple, it's not just that you're not foreseeing. It's not just that you're not discerning. It's not just that you're happy with the here and now. The underlying element of being simple is you don't believe that there's anything else beyond what is easily grasped that's worth understanding.
Aren't there people who are born simple-minded? Like they just don't have the capacity.
But this
to
isn't.
think further. So,
But this isn't about ability. This is about intent.
So it's the choice of it. So
It's about the attitude, right? Right. That's who the Proverbs are complaining about. It's not about whether you can or can't grasp things, right? We went to dinner with my kids, and we were talking about calculus and how certain topics you just don't get. We talked about it. Calc 3 was this topic I just kind of wrote down the equations and kind of got through the class because I hated it. I just could not grasp three-dimensional shapes and all these things. It just didn't click, right? There's just certain things that just don't work. On the other hand, there's other things that you grab, right? And it's different between everybody else. My brother-in-law is mechanically inclined. He takes whatever you give him and disassembles it and puts it all back together and, powers it up and everything else, and it works great. I usually destroy it while I'm taking it apart, if I get that far, right? It just doesn't click. So this isn't about ability. It's about intent. Simplicity is the belief that not that I can't understand it, that there's nothing worth understanding deeper than what I grasp. Does that make sense? That's why you don't discern. That's why you're happy with the here and now, because why should I look any further? That's the man. He foresees, he looks forward because he believes that there's something there to understand. The simple says, well, what's wrong? There's nothing coming. We're good. Make sense? Scott, Jason?
Is it also like ignoring evil or ignoring sin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When a devil prowls around like a lion, you have to understand that he's hunting you, which means you got to start outthinking him. It's like in Jurassic Park where he tries to take the steps and he thinks he's got her, but then the thing comes from the side. And the last thing he says is clever girl because he realizes he's been outthought. Same idea. To be able to be aware that the devil's coming is to also start to outthink about what are the strategies that I use to keep from falling into his nets. That's why Peter gives us that warning. That's why Paul warns the Ephesian elders about wolves that come in, not just as a simple fact, but as an idea that you should then start taking action. You should start thinking about how you're going to counter these dangers. Does that make sense? So the simple doesn't do that because, why would I think ahead? There's nothing. Everything looks fine. There's nothing there because I don't want to know. Make sense? So that's simple. What's sloth? Laziness, okay? Because of laziness, the building decays, and through idleness of hands, the house leaks. The lazy man will not plow of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing. And then Proverbs 26, this is one of my favorites. As a door turns on its hinges, so does the lazy man on his bed. I think that's awesome. What does the lazy man do? All I do is turn over. Right? Time to get up. Right? Close enough. I turned over. Right? I'm just sunning the other side of me. So laziness. So this is slothfulness. Now, what's the idea of slothfulness? Laziness. What's the downside of laziness? Simple didn't pursue because he didn't think there was anything else to pursue. What's the problem with sloth?
willing to put the effort into it.
Doesn't say it is valuable. What's more valuable to a lazy person? Idleness, right? And we're not talking about the poo. Doing nothing is my favorite something. That's different, okay? This is doing nothing because I just have no motivation to do anything. Okay? That's a slothful person. We know it, we hate it, we're all guilty of it at times, and yet, if there's one aspect about myself that I hate, especially, it's laziness. Because I know what God has given me. I know the opportunities that He's put before me, the things that He's blessed me with. And for me to be lazy, I'm not talking about rest, laziness, when I know I should do something and I just don't bother to, it bothers me. Because it's such an affront to God's character. The things that He's blessed me with, and I'm just kind of saying, it's not worth it to me. I'm just going to chill here in bed or whatever. So, it's difficult.
What's the line between laziness and rest?
Oh, that's a different question. It is. But I will tell you, it all comes down to heart, right? If God has called you to do something and you don't bother to do it, that's laziness. If God says to rest and you keep running, that's not work. That's sin, right? So it usually comes down to that intent. You usually can tell the difference between laziness and rest based on what should I know that I'm doing, what do I know I should do, and what am I actually deciding to do?
That's not being guilted to do something.
And why, right? Yeah. So, anyways. Okay, last one, presumption. Presumption is much harder. What is presumption? Give me a definition.
Thinking you know the answer, but you really don't.
Okay, good.
Unwarranted assumption.
Unwarranted assumption, that's good. So thinking you know an answer, but you don't, an unwarranted assumption. You guys nailed it. So presumption is someone that forms a worldview based on what he thinks, but never actually goes back to check his facts. Okay? So what's the underlying principle in presumption?
I already have it figured out.
Yeah, it starts with the same two letters. Pride. I think I know. I think I can count on this. I think I already know it's going to happen. So therefore, here's all my decisions I'm going to make. So Numbers 15. But the person who does anything presumptuously, whether he is native born or a stranger, that one brings reproach on the Lord. Okay, and then 2 Peter again condemns this, and especially those who walk according to the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despise authority. They are presumptuous and self-willed. What are they presuming? They know better, and more specifically,
Their way is better than God's.
I don't need to listen to God. That the way that it is will always be. Numbers, same thing. When you presume upon the Lord, you are assuming that you know what He's going to do without Him telling you. Right? What He hasn't revealed, you're filling in the blanks. One of those dangerous things in the whole world you can do. When you start filling in the blanks and telling God what He will do because you know Him, that's a problem. Now, when He's revealed His will and you repeat it back to Him, that's holiness. That's bringing yourself into alignment with God's will. In this case, though, presumptuousness is the idea that you are presuming what He hasn't revealed, you're filling in the blanks and explaining God in ways that He hasn't authorized necessarily. Does that make sense? Presumptuousness is the idea of the easiest one is in 2 Peter. Where is God? It's been 2,000 years and He hasn't come yet. Therefore, if He hasn't come now, and He said He's supposed to be coming soon, it's been 2,000 years, that's not soon. Obviously, this is wrong. He's never coming. So what should we do? Eat, drink, and be merry. That makes sense? Whereas if He said that it is, He's coming, time's of very little meaning in terms of eternity. Okay? So we've got simple sloth and presumption. Presumption makes his own theology. All right, so why does Bunyan show us these people? Why is Christian encountering them right now? As a warning of of what not to do. Yeah, right? So he's just encountered the cross, what Bunyan sees as one of the typical things that new Christians struggle with. Simple, slothfulness, presumptuousness, right? This guy has no knowledge. He has very little knowledge. He just started off on the cross. Christian's just starting to run. He can either get simple, where he doesn't believe there's anything more than just the cross, and therefore, hey, I just hope that God loves everyone, and that's all I'm going to go for. He can be lazy and say, well, I'm saved, I guess I don't have to do anything else. Or he can be presumptuous and say, well, I guess I've learned everything there is to learn, I guess I'll just go from here. I can fill it in from the rest, right? 3 dangers for new Christians. So Christian, then seeing them lie in this case, went to them, if peradventure he might awake them, and cried, you are like them that sleep on top of a mast, for the Dead Sea is under you, a gulf that hath no bottom. Okay, so a couple things from that statement. The first thing is, Christian seeing them went to them, if he might awaken them. So again, what is Christian seeing? What does he think he might do? How does he see them? In need of rescue, because who are they?
He thinks they're fellow believers.
He thinks they're fellow believers that have just kind of fallen by the side. So what is he coming to do?
Encourage them.
Yeah, let's go, guys. Come on, we gotta go. Let's go. We can all go together. We're all going to go like the Merry Ben. We're going to be the Wizard of Oz. We're all going to go walk this path together, right? All 4 of us. See, that works out. All 4 of us. So that's what he kind of goes to them, thinking he's going to awaken them. And his assumption is these are pilgrims that want to make it to the celestial city, and they just kind of need some encouragement to do so. No problem. So he goes over there, and he says, you are asleep like them that are on top of the mast, for the Dead Sea is under you, a gulf that hath no bottom. So that's a expression we wouldn't use for a number of reasons anymore, but the idea is we would say you're asleep at the wheel, right? Because you're the guy at the top of the mast is sitting in the crow's nest. What's his job?
Watch out for dangers.
He's the lookout. And why is he at the top of the crow's nest? So he can see further, right? And as soon as he sees something, his job is to tell someone down below, hey, left, right, somebody's coming, whatever it is, arm the guns. And I don't know if that's the case, but that's what I would do. So that's the idea of the guy in the crow's nest, is to look out and to start anticipating what's coming next. And yet here you are, you're asleep. You're the guy that's supposed to be looking the furthest and giving us early warning, and you're asleep like it doesn't matter. You're not concerned with anything. So you're asleep, and the Dead Sea is under you. You're afraid. There's all kinds of concerns and things that are problems that could come along, and you're asleep. Awake, therefore, and come away. Be willing also, and I will help you off with your irons. So, come on, wait, I'll help you. I'll do everything. I'll pour my life into you. He also told them that if he that goeth about like a roaring lion comes by, you will certainly become a prey to his. So you get the idea that these men, that Christian just pours himself into these men. He's giving them everything. He's giving them sound warning. He's giving them scripture. He's giving them his effort. I'll help you with the fetters. I will do what's necessary to help you guys continue on. Which is interesting that Christian understands that he says there's a lion coming around. It's a man that roars like a lion. So Christian sees this not as a pleasure cruise, but as a battle. He's already got that piece in his head, and that's important. Barry Horner says, thus the Christian pilgrimage is more biblically and realistically portrayed as a hazardous expedition rather than a leisurely, blissful pathway that offers frequent periods of pleasurable repose, right? So I've heard people use the term faith journey. Not really. It's a faith war, if you want to look at it more like that. Okay, so and Christian understands that, so he encourages them. Don't fall asleep at the mast. Let's go. We got to keep going. Donald Whitney said, our bodies are inclined to ease, pleasure, gluttony, and sloth. Unless we practice self-control, our bodies will tend to serve evil more than God. We must carefully discipline ourselves in how we walk in this world, else we will conform more to its ways rather than to the ways of Christ. Okay, so there's our setup. Christian says, you got to keep going. And they say, with that they looked upon him and began to reply in this sort. Now, does it say anything about standing up? No. Simple said, I see no danger. Sloth said, yet a little more sleep. And presumption said, every fat must stand upon its own bottom. What is the answer else that I should give thee? And so they lay down to sleep again, and Christian went on his way. Now, these expressions are great. Okay, Simple says, I see no danger. So therefore,
There is no danger.
there is done. right? Well, I'm 10 minutes away from church. I have to be there in 5 minutes. Am I late? Well, not technically, right? I mean, I'm not late. I still got 5 minutes, right? That's the same idea. What's happening is all that matters is right now. I see no danger. There's nothing more than what's right here, okay? Sloth, yet a little more sleep. That's Lot's response. He doesn't even think about waking up. Yeah, he's reaching. You can imagine him kind of like reaching for the snooze alarm somewhere, trying to just turn off Christian, thinking it's just the alarm, right? And finally, presumption. Every fat must stand upon its own bottom. What else is the answer? So that one is a harder expression, actually, and it's one that we've, when I was looking it up, it's a struggle to find what it actually means. The idea is, though, that it's the expression that I've got to stand by myself. Every fat must stand on its own bottom. I got to take a stand for myself. I got to dig my heels in. I got to do this. This is an expression of independence. Not quite whatever floats your boat. That's the idea of you can have it your way, whatever way. This is more of an expression of pride. Hey, at some point, I got to stand on my own 2 feet. Does that make sense? Yeah, pull myself up on my bootstraps. Those kind of expressions. I've got to do this myself. And so, as Christian says, you got to watch out. There's something coming. He goes, well, I guess, we all got to grow up. We all got to man up some point, right? That's what he tells him. Now, these expressions are important. Simple says, I see no danger. Now, what's going to happen to Simple? How is danger going to get him?
Pretty easily by sneaking up on him. So
By sneaking up? Well, do you have to sneak up on Simple?
Walk up
No.
and stab him. He's dead.
No, but that's true. Yeah, it sounds funny, but that's exactly what it is. The simple can be led away so easily because they don't look past the surface. They listen to whatever sounds good. You talked about tickling their ears. Of course it's going to tickle your ears. How many false prophets come in with a message that everybody hates? That doesn't make any sense, right? You got to come in. That's why they show you the sleek new. When I give a Best Buy advertisement in the paper, they don't put the tiny little, 30-inch monitor on TV on the page, right? They show the big 58-inch TV and how much of a 20% discount that is, even though they know that, that's still ridiculous amounts of money. But they show it like that. They're trying to entice you. And if you don't think about your own budget, you don't think about what you have, that's enticing. Well, that's simple. I don't think, I just do. I'll follow along. And so Simple will be destroyed because he won't even realize what hit him. C.S. Lewis said, Christ wants a child's heart but a grown-up's head. He wants us to be simple, single-minded, affectionate, and teachable as good children are, but he also wants every bit of intelligence we have to be alert at its job and in first-class fighting trim. Okay? There's a difference between simple and being simple. Okay, God is considered simple, meaning he's focused, he's one unit. This is being simple in attitude. Okay, completely different things. Sloth. How easy will it be for Sloth to be devoured by this lion?
He's not going to run away.
No, he probably won't run away. Yeah, he'll be destroyed before he even knows it. Right? He'll be gone. You won't even see what's coming at him. And then finally, presumption. Presumption is a tough one because presumption is thinking. He is active. He is all about thinking. He can see things coming. The problem is he fills it in by himself. But when you fill things in by yourself, what kind of theology will you create? And yeah, your own. Your theology will be as good as you. Okay? And so what happens is now he will be caught because he will be lured out of the way, and he will go because he wants to go that direction. It will seem pleasant to him, it will seem desirable, and so he will get lost by going out of the way of his own accord. Okay. So they all have an excuse. They all have an excuse. Yet, I'm going to move on a little bit because I'm behind. Christian says, yet was he troubled to think, this is Christian, yet he was troubled to think that men in that danger should so little esteem the kindness of him that so freely offered to them help, both by awakening of them, counseling of them, and proffering to help them off with their irons. So he's struggling with the idea that they just don't care. He comes with passion and truth, and they just it just falls on dead ears, right? It feels like, when you throw something against a wall and it just kind of falls to the ground. That's what it feels like when he puts in all that effort to them. It just falls down with absolutely no effect. Now, in part 2, this is Bunyan's quick follow-up on these guys. This is what he writes about them as Christiana passes by the same area. Now I still saw in my dream that they went on till there was a place that simple sloth and presumption lay and slept in, where Christian went by on the pilgrimage. And behold, they were hanged up in irons a little way off the other side. Then said Mercy to him that was their guide and conductor, what are those 3 men, and what are they hanged there? Greatheart says, These three men were men of very bad qualities. They had no mind to be pilgrims themselves, and whosoever they could they hindered. They were for sloth and folly themselves, and whosoever they could persuade with. So they made so too, and withal taught them to presume that they should do well at last. They were asleep when Christian went by, and now you go by, they are hanged. So their end, hanged. They are done. They have been killed. Their faith is dead. Their Christian lives are dead. It's ended. They never made it. They're dead where they walk, where they slept. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, now we get to the ones that are a little more challenging. You kind of see how this is going? Like, this is what we're going to be doing the rest of the time. So just be ready. And as he was troubled thereabout, he espied 2 men come tumbling over the wall on the left hand of the narrow way, and they made up a pace to him. The name of one was Formalist, and the name of the other Hypocrisy. So as I said, they drew up unto him, and thus entered with him into discourse. Now, Bunyan's pictures, again, are absolutely fantastic. The way that he chooses to illustrate the way things happen and what you can get out of it is just, this is the fun part, right? So, as he was troubled thereabout, he espied 2 men come tumbling over the wall. He comes tumbling over the wall. Now, what does that tell you?
They didn't come by way of the gate.
They didn't come by way of the gate. What did they come by as they came tumbling over the wall? What is the idea of tumbling over the wall? Just picture that in a second. Yeah, it looks kind of clumsy, right? It looks kind of like they're fumbling, like they're just kind of like rolling over. It makes me think of Winnie the Pooh. Like he just kind of comes tumbling over the wall, like they kind of over and then kind of fall around. When I grew up, I used to watch a show, or movie, The Apple Dumpling Gang, with Tim Conway and Don Knotts, and they were fumblers. They thought themselves to be they were outlaws. They thought themselves to be so keen and crafty, and yet they were klutzes, right? That was a funny part of the show. So that's what these guys come over. So they come tumbling over the wall on the left hand of the narrow way. Now, if you're left-handed, I apologize, but in the scriptures, there's usually things split up between left hand and right hand. And which way is usually the good side, and which way is usually the bad side? Yeah. What was on the left side? Well, the goats. And what was on the other side? The sheep. You want to be a sheep. You don't want to be a goat. So usually when you see things in Scripture and they're split up by the left and the right, that's usually bad news, right? So in this case, they were coming over this side of the wall on the left hand of the narrow way. So that already sets us up for who these guys are. And they made up a pace to him. Now, what does that tell you about these guys?
They're very energetic.
They're very energetic, and keep going.
They targeted him.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they targeted him.
They want to look like they're like everybody else that got on the path.
They got on the path, and they caught up, and what else?
They have something to say?
Yes. They are supremely confident. They're not ashamed a bit about what they just did. They don't mind it. They don't have a problem with it. They come up right next to him because they got something to say, because they're confident. They have absolutely no shame in what they just did. They are okay. Right? Now, talking in John 10, I think. I'm pretty sure I've got it in here, but this idea is they've come over the wall. They haven't entered in the gate. Now we're talking about the great shepherd. Is that John 6? Oh my, I'm pulling blank. Anyways, in the great shepherd allegory, Jesus is the great shepherd. And what does he say about how to discern false shepherds from the good shepherd? The shepherd uses the gate, and anyone that comes over the wall is a thief or a robber, right? That's how you tell the difference. Well, the same thing as sheep. Sheep don't come tumbling over a wall. They come in through the sheep gate along with the shepherd. That's how you can tell true sheep from false sheep. Well, what do these guys just do? They jump the wall. Okay? And Christian realizes, that just doesn't seem right. Okay? So the first one is formalist. Now, what is formalist all about?
Appearance over actuality.
Okay, appearance over actuality. Meaning what?
It's the form of it is more important than the substance.
Good.
Kind of like legalism.
A lot like legalism, right? But not quite like legalism in the sense that it's more focused on the specific line items. So it's less about legality as appearance, right? So you're talking about, I want to have a Christmas Eve service. Well, why do we want to have a Christmas Eve service? Because we always have a Christmas Eve service, so we have to have a Christmas Eve service. All right, well, we're just going to sing a couple songs and go home. Wait, what about the candles? We have to have a candle. Somebody has to read from Luke 2. And you start to see that there's just this liturgy. There's a certain expectation of the right way of doing things. Well, do you actually listen to Luke 2? No, but we should read it. We should read it. That's important, that we should read this, right? So formalist is kind of just all about doing the right things, whatever he considers to be right, because they are the right things. And there's no substance to it. There's not necessarily any backing to it. It's just what you should do. Alexander White says, look at the religious formalist at family worship with his household gathered around him, all in his own image. He would not on any account let his family break up any night without the habitual duty. He has a severe method in his religious duties that nothing is ever allowed to discharge or in any way interfere with. As the hour strikes, the big Bible is brought out. He opens where he left off last night. He reads the regulation chapter. He leads the singing in the regulation psalm. And then, as from a book, he repeats his regulation prayer. He never says a word to show that he either sees or feels what he reads, and his household break up without an idea in their heads or an affection in their hearts. He comes to church and goes through public worship in the same wooden way. Now, if you were to look at what he did, would you argue with what he did? No. But is there any heart to it? He does it because he's supposed to, not necessarily because he desires to. So that's the formalist. Hypocrisy. Now, remember we said these two usually come together, right? So when you see two things listed together, they're qualities that are often associated to each other. So hypocrisy is usually associated with formalism. Now, what is hypocrisy? And when I looked this one up, I actually was struggling to kind of cut out the number of quotes about hypocrisy. Everybody's got a quote about hypocrisy. What is hypocrisy?
Say but not to do.
Okay, keep going.
Jesus said of the Pharisees that listen to what they say but not what they do.
Right.
But they sit in the seat of Moses.
Right.
But
They say but they don't do. Keep going.
A hypocrite is somebody in the Greek was a play actor,
Right.
putting on a role that they never actually were.
Right. Right. The idea is you want to be perceived one way, even though that's not really who you are. That's a hypocrite. A hypocrite is all about appearances. I want to be seen this way. I want people to think this of me. It's most of Instagram, right? Here's my life as I want it to be portrayed. Right? Have you seen the new movie Jumanji? There's a great scene. It's kind of funny. This girl's taking a selfie. She's got the selfie stick and everything else, and she's arranging her coffee cup and stuff, and she gets it all ready. And then she lays down and she kind of arrays her hair and she holds up the selfie stick and takes this picture, and then she writes, "Just woke up," right? After setting this whole thing up, right? It's living the life that you portray on Instagram. That is the idea, right? It's here's what I want people to think of me. And it's funny what they're finding. This is totally aside. This is for free, as Ken would say. As what they're finding is the suicide rate amongst kids that grew up with this is skyrocketing, especially amongst girls, because they're all comparing their lives to the lives that other people portray on Instagram, and that breeds, the complaint, the desperation. How come my life isn't like that? Well, that's because their life isn't like that either, but you don't realize that, right? But it makes you desperate, and it's driving up suicide rates because they can't deal with this. Okay? So the idea with the hypocrite is, here's who I actually am, but here's who I try to portray in my life. That's a hypocrite. So you got a formalist who wants things to be a certain way, and a hypocrite who just wants people to think of him in a certain way. Remember, the substance, the reality does not matter to either one of these things, to either one of these men. What matters is how people see and think about what's being done. Okay? So these are the men that jump the wall, and they come up to Christian, and they just, without shame, come up right next to him because they're on the path, he's on the path. Hey, we should be friends, right? We're all the same. Christian says, "Gentlemen, whence you came and whither you go?" And formalist and hypocrisy said, "We are born in the land of vain glory and are going for praise to Mount Zion." Now, vain glory. Vain's going to come up a few times. What is vanity? Huh?
All about you.
All about you. It's emptiness.
There's no real substance to it.
Yeah. Vanity is emptiness is the best word to understand it. It's the idea, in this case, it's vain glory. So glory where there's nothing to be actually glorified, right? Vain confidence. Confidence when there's actually nothing to be confident in. Does that make sense? Vanity Fair, we'll find out, is full of a lot of action with absolutely no substance. Well, this is where we're at. These guys come from vain glory. We come from vainglory. We have a glory that we believe in, even though there's nothing to it. And this is where we come from. And we're going for praise to Mount Zion. Now, what's the difference between going for praise to Mount Zion and going to praise at Mount Zion? What's the difference?
The direction in which the praise is.
Which is kind of a big deal, isn't it? What do they think is going to happen at Mount Zion? For what? For themselves. For all the great things. I made sure that our church had a Christmas Eve service every year. God, I never let you down. Right? Is that really what matters? Is that really what matters? And there's nothing wrong with the Christmas Eve service. I'm just using that because it's just easy. It's just an illustration. All right, so they're totally set. Now, Christian, why came you not into the gate which standeth at the beginning of the way? Know you not that it is written that he that cometh in by the door, but climbeth out some other way, the same as a thief and a robber? Right, that's from John 10. There it is. John 10. If you come in any other way, you're a thief and a robber. You guys didn't come in the gate. You're illegitimate sheep. Formalists and hypocrisy says this together. They said that to go to the gate for entrance was by all their countrymen accounted too far about, right? And that therefore their usual way was to make a shortcut of it and to climb over the wall as they had done. Now, this is important. What does it mean to be too far about? I mean, literally, of course, it just means that vainglory stands how far away from the wicket gate? Quite a ways. Like opposite. There's going to be a lot of places that are opposite of the wicket gate that we're going to meet, okay? I know that's physically impossible, but allegorically, it's always possible. Okay? So it's too far to go. So what does that mean, though? Think about what is that implying? What's the real life situation that Bunyan is trying to allegorize?
Well, they're saying that it's not worth it to go through the gate.
Good.
And they're also saying that it's too much work. And why not just cut a few corners if you can.
Right. It's not worth it. It's too far to go. It's too much work to do what?
Follow God's way.
To go to specifically? Go to the gate. Because what has to happen at the gate? What is too much work? What is too hard to do? What is too far out of the way that it makes it undesirable? They have to die to themselves. You have to give up everything. Now, if you're a formalist and your thing is, I got to get a certain way of doing things, what do you have to die to? Your way of doing things. And if you're hypocrisy, what do you have to die to? What people think about you. I have to be willing to say, all that matters to me is what God thinks. I don't care about what other people think about me. I don't care if we have that Christmas Eve service. It's all about what God desires for his people. If there is a Christmas Eve service, yay and amen. If there isn't, fine. I'm okay because God said this, this, and this. And therefore, that's all that matters to me. Does that make sense? To die to yourself, to die to those things is what it's going to cost for these men to come through the wicket gate. And so people from vainglory that find glory in the most unsubstantial things, they don't want to come to the cross because it means giving up that glory and laying themselves at the foot of the cross as nothing. Now they will receive everything, but do they care? No. That's not valuable to them. What's valuable to them, what brings them glory, are the vain things of this world. And so the wicket gate is way too far out of the way. It costs way too much for me to go to because it will cost me everything. And I don't want to give it up. So they say to them, and all their countrymen is counted too far away, so it's just easier to tumble over the way.
Everybody else is doing it.
Right, we'll get there. But will it not be counted a trespass against the Lord of the city, whether they are bound, thus to violate his revealed will? Hypocrisy and formalist says this. As for that, he needed not trouble his head thereabout, for what they did they are accustomed for, and could produce, if need were, testimony that would witness it for 1,000 years. This is a bad answer, okay? Don't take this. So Christian says, well, wait a second, guys. He said you got to come into the gate. You came tumbling over the wall. That makes you a trespasser, okay? That's just plain and simple. If there's a fence and you climb over it, you're not supposed to be where you are. That's general rule of fences, okay? So you're a trespasser. You're violating God's will. And they said, you know what? Don't sweat it. Trust me. If he asks, we can give him a whole list of things, our testimony, our list of things that we can find reason for that have been good for 1,000 years. Now, that is incredibly important. Because what are they appealing to? Tradition. 1,000 years ago, for Bunyan would have been about 600 or so. What else happened in roughly 1,000 years earlier? The fall of Rome. The fall of Rome was essentially the establishment of the Catholic Church. So when they go back and they're talking about early church fathers and tradition, what did the Catholic Church appeal to at the time? Well, gosh, all the early church fathers. And Gregory, at the time, Gregory is one of them. So that will be what they're talking about. I can produce 1,000 years worth of history. I can tell you all about the church fathers. I can tell you all about what's been done. I can tell you all about the church and how it's supposed to be run. So if God asks, I will give him tradition, because this is how it's always been done. So therefore, it's right. That's right. But said Christian, will your practice stand a trial at law? And foremost in hypocrisy, they said, that custom, it being of so long a standing as above 1,000 years, would doubtless now be admitted as a thing legal by any impartial judge. Now, that's important again. Now, on a human level, is that true? Absolutely. It's common law, right? If it's always been true, if that's the way it's always been done, then we have to allow that as the way it's always been done. Here's the problem. Are they in a court of human law? No. So what is the presumption? Here we are back to presumption. What is the presumption behind that statement?
That God will judge by the way the same standards that we judge.
True. And based on what we've seen, what is his judgment? If he hasn't corrected it yet, then he must be okay with it. Because he hasn't done anything to stop it, he's basically saying it's okay. Is that a wise presumption? No, because what has he given us that takes away any of those presumptions? His Bible. And so if the Word tells you something, just because he hasn't physically stopped you, it doesn't mean that he's okay with it. What's in the Bible tells you what he's okay with. It doesn't matter. If he doesn't stop you for now, he will stop you eventually. Okay, this is all a limited time offer. So, and besides, said they, if we get into the way, what matters which way we get in? If we are in, we are in. Thou art but in the way, also as we perceive, came into the gate, and we also are in the way, and we came tumbling over the wall wherein now. Is thy condition better than ours? How are you better than me? We're both walking this path together. You came into the gate, I came over the wall. What difference does it make? Right now, at this moment, we are both on the path, walking in the same direction, at the same speed. What's the difference between you and me? Do you get where he's going with this? Well, how did they see the world? How did they define a Christian? Meaning what?
Perception.
What does it mean to be on the way, in their opinion? Going through the motions of what? True.
Ritual.
They won't make it to the celestial city. Spoiler alert, okay? They won't make it.
They're seeking God, they're just not going the right way.
On the surface, they say they're seeking God.
Yeah.
They're doing the things that a Christian does. They're being moral. They're going to church. They're singing the hymns, right? They're talking about biblical truth, right? So from all appearances, they look like the real deal. That's what they're saying. What's the difference between us and you? We're all sitting here at church together. We're all listening to the sermon. We're all saying amen at the same time. We're all doing the responsive reading together in rhythm, right? That's the biggest thing about responsive readings. Everybody has to be talking at the same time in rhythm, otherwise it's like weird, right? That's what they're bragging about. We can do this together. We are walking together. So what's the difference? What's the difference between you and me? And this is what Christian says. I walk by the rule of my master. You walk by the rude working of your fancies. Just because we're both sitting here at church together doesn't mean that we're motivated by the same thing. I walk because God told me to walk. You walk because you like this path. You are counted thieves already by the Lord of the way. Therefore, I doubt you will not be found true men at the end of the way. You come in by yourselves without his direction and shall go out by yourselves without his mercy. Okay? Now, there was a certain degree of truthfulness that I think we've lost in a lot of ways in our time, where the Puritans weren't afraid to kind of just pull out the knife and sort of like, let's just kind of cut this up and cut it out for what it is, right? He lays it out. To this, they made him little answer. This is great. Only they bid him to look to himself, and then I saw that they went on every man in his way without much conference one with another. So what do they say to him?
That he needed to mind his own business.
Yep. Agree to disagree. So we're just going to go our way, you go your way. Now, here's what they left him with. Save that these two men told Christian that as to laws and ordinances they doubted not, but that they should conscientiously do them as he. We're going to be moral, you're going to be moral. Therefore, they said, we see not wherein thou differest from us, but by the coat that is on thy back, which was, as we trow, given thee by some of thy neighbors, to hide the shame of thy nakedness. Now, what was he wearing? The new raiments, which were Christ's righteousness. They were glowing white. So what, just on the surface, what did they notice about him? What was the only difference that they called out?
That he had new clothes.
Yeah. So when you look at it, what that's Bunyan saying, the clothes make the man, right? The fact that he was wearing Christ's righteousness, the fact that he was clothed with Christ's righteousness made him different in appearance, in action, in attitude. There was something observably different about him because of the clothing that he wore. Make sense? Different enough that these men who also went to church, who were also religious, who understood the whole way of the Christian life, even they were like, yeah, we get it. You're a little different on your side of things. You're not the same as me. That's an incredible compliment. If you ever get that compliment from somebody in the world, you're different. Thank you. I appreciate that. Whether they like you or not is a completely different story. But the fact that you're different is important. And so they point out that he's got this coat. Now, in their understanding, though, what was their opinion about his coat? It was given to him.
By God, it was given by his neighbors.
Right.
Naked, so that he was not ashamed.
So he's not ashamed. That's the idea of being naked. That he was ashamed, so that he can feel good about himself. So that he can, my father used to always say, Christianity is just a crutch. When you can't stand on your own, when you're too weak, when you're unconfident, and you need something, that's why people go after religion. Right? And so that's how they look at it. You do this because it makes you feel better about yourself. Okay, go ahead and do that. But we're on this path together. Just because you're not confident enough to admit it isn't really my problem. Okay? So Christian says this in response. By laws and ordinance you will not be saved, since you came not in by the door. And as for this coat that is on my back, it was given to me by the Lord of the place whither I go, and that, as you say, to cover my nakedness with. And I take it as a token of his kindness to me, that I had nothing but rags before. And besides, thus I comfort myself as I go. Surely, think I, when I came to the gate of the city, the Lord thereof will know me for good, since I have this coat on my back, a coat that he gave me in the day that he stripped me of my rags. I have, moreover, a mark on my forehead, of which perhaps you have taken no notice, which one of my Lord's most intimate associates fixed there in the day of my burden, the day my burden fell off my shoulders. I will tell you, moreover, that I had then given me a roll, sealed to comfort me by reading, as I go on by the way. I also bid it to give it the celestial city in token of my certain going in after it. All which things I doubt you want, and want them because you came not in at the gate. That's a lot, but do you understand what's going on? Where does Christian go to? This is important. How is he dealing with these men? First of all, is he trying to beat them at their own game? Does he take apart the law? Does he take apart tradition? Does he go after Catholicism? Does he talk about big theological concepts? What does he talk about?
Go straight to the heart and the motivation.
Straight to the heart and the motivation. Specifically saying, here's what I believe. I can't necessarily undo your belief, but I can certainly tell you what my beliefs are. And here's what I got on good authority. By the shining ones, he's saying, based on what the scriptures say, I am covered in Christ's righteousness. I have guaranteed entrance into heaven because of what the one who owns heaven has given to me. Look at this mark on my forehead, the work of the Spirit. All these things are for me. They're mine. They have been given to me by him. I have no doubt about it because it is him that has given to me, not me getting it from other people. So, this is what I have. This is what I love. This is the thing that's good. But I don't think you guys really care. This is what you get when you come in the gate. To these things they gave him no answer. Only they looked upon each other and laughed. That's great. Did they rebuke him? No. What did they do? Mocked him. They ridiculed him. They ridiculed him. When you're losing an argument, what do you usually do? Yeah. Or you attack the person. That when somebody's attacking you personally, that's when you know you're probably winning an argument. Because they run out of things that actually make reasonable sense, and now they're just trying to destroy you, thinking if I destroy you, I destroy your argument. Right? That's the idea. So when they laughed, they didn't have an answer to what Christian said, because they knew he was right. But instead of actually dealing with it, all they did was laugh at him, ridicule him, make him feel stupid, basically saying, whatever. That's it. That's all they said. And so I saw them all, save that Christian kept before. He had no more talk with himself, no more talk, but with himself, and that sometimes sighingly and sometimes comfortably also he would be often reading in the roll that one of the shining ones gave him, by which he was refreshed. So they keep going, formless and hypocrisy. Now, notice this though. They kept going on. Christian puts a comfortable distance between him and them. Now, what's important about formless and hypocrisy and Christian in our picture now?
They're also
They're also walking. So is formless and hypocrisy given up? No, they're still going, and they're still going in the same direction. So from all appearances, all three of them are on the path making progress. Right? This is important. But Christians, because we'll see in the next section what's going to happen. Religion is not a thing that's just possible to be put off and put on like a Sunday dress. If you think you are doing so, believe me, that as yet is not a religion, but a web of delusions. I just like that one. I just thought that was really good. All right. So you can see formless and hypocrisy. We'll see their end next week as we get to the hill of difficulty. That was a lot. It's going to be like this every week. So just get used to it. Any questions as I finish up? Formless and hypocrisy. What could possibly go wrong with formless and hypocrisy? Well, we will find out next week. But we'll also find out Christians' first mistake. Okay, we've seen them come to these guys and say, you guys got to get going. You don't understand the dangers awaiting for you. And you are asleep at the wheel. What are you doing? You got to get moving. Just remember that scene, because that was his first encounter. He handled it well. He comes to these guys. He handles it well. We're going to get to the hill difficulty. He's going to handle that not so well. Okay?